doing the architecture degree, I studied in Perth, in Western Australia. It was a fantastic course. And, all the way along, I always had quite a practical approach to everything I ever undertook. Whether it was just, simply treating uni a little bit more like a 9-to-5 job to make sure you got your work done and you actually got to sleep, which was a bit unheard of for all of us, as we know, to just viewing how the lecturers and how the information came across. And I think having an innate understanding and just passion for sort of construction, costing and understanding just sort of put a foundation behind my degree. And I didn't really know it at the time, but just sort of went through the motions of the standard architect and took on a job and looked for inspiring people. And then as time passed, I felt there was always a disconnect between the builder and the architect. And, having had the opportunity to work on a few sort of construction admin jobs and the standard, ABIC style, meeting builders, seeing how they work and seeing the responsibilities of, the architect between it, I really felt that the two industries needed to speak more to one another. Which, in partnering with my current business partner, Rodney, we formed S&K Group to make sure that a lot of the expectations, the communication and the understanding was aligned, in some ways so that, architects understood how we wanted to design and builders understood how architects would design and architects understood how builders would create. And that was a much more firm relationship, which we wanted to create.
Did you already know Rodney before starting the business together, like for a long time, or was it sort of you got to know each other in your careers?
We'd known each other as sort of friends, university. We'd been on a few educational trips together, but, you sort of right place, right time, the serendipitous moments in life when we caught up for a lunch and we realized we're in the same position and, hey, we could do this. This would be great.
Yeah.
Let's just get started.
And was Rodney in the building industry and going, I just wish that we could sort of break down the barriers with architects a little bit more? Was there this sort of shared ethos between you guys even early on?
Yeah, it was pretty similar. I think I really wanted to pull them together, and then having someone having, a willingness and an openness in the high-end residential field, it made sense. Knowing each other was one thing, and then the respect of each other's professions was what really drew us together.
Yeah. Was this idea of we do some projects where we're just the builder and some projects where we're designed by us and built by us, was that there from the beginning, or how did you initially start off in terms of like structuring the types of projects that you did and how you delivered them?
I think at first it was a bit of, who's going to take us on? It could be anyone.
Could be anyone.
Yeah. So I think we really wanted just the design and construct approach. I'd done a year with another design and construct business, very different to how we operate now, but it sort of taught me the bones of how I wanted things to be, but also importantly, how I didn't want them to be. And without recreating the wheel, what it meant for us to create a successful business. We were doing things like maintenance jobs, gutters, roofing, cladding. We were doing property inspections. It was a bit of whatever we could find to sort of find our path. And we've learned a great amount of patience in what we do, that, the right projects and the right clients and the right direction usually uncovers itself through patience. And probably a couple of years in, we realized some people started coming to us with, we don't want your architectural services, but we want to be able to build with you, or, have you price the project. And sort of that became something which we invested in and thought, well, why can't we do both? We have all the skills to build, so why can't some projects be design and construction and others be pure construction?
When you were kind of going through that process of kind of exploring around and figuring out kind of what the right fit was, how did you kind of know when it was clicking and working? Was that when people started coming to you, or were you guys also kind of getting a feeling that a certain approach that we're taking or some of the things that we're doing are working better than other things?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I think because we were working in this like little hotbed of just us with our clients, and it's very difficult to get the message out there, it was very much a sort of a word of mouth and, networking approach. And, you can only tap so many people on the shoulder and get in touch and get in front of so many people when you do that. It's super important, and we still do it today. We still like to meet with, colleagues, even if it is just for a coffee to talk industry, but that's so important in a general base understanding. And we probably found our biggest advocates at that time were working with other interior architects and trying to get in touch with architects. So that they're your biggest advocates because they're the ones that are effectively going to recommend you for work to a degree. What we found is, as we launched into the marketing world and, put up our really terrible Facebook page to start, and then you learn what needs to happen, and same with Instagram, and work out how to make it work slowly over time with your site signage and process and just communicating with people that get in touch with you. everything slowly and slowly started to grow.
Yeah. So when you were first kind of going from word of mouth to like being a good kind of communicating firm, doing a bit of marketing, was it tough to sort of figure out how to sort of make it clear what you guys do? Because you do a few different things, like you're doing, as I mentioned, you're building projects in collaboration with other architects and interior designers. You're having people come to you directly and say, could you be my builder? You're having other people come and say, could you be my architect, my builder?
I think it was a very difficult process, and I almost think still to this day it's extremely difficult to do.
Yeah, right.
Because even when you want to explain who you are, what you stand for on your website, as you know, as we all know, you can look at 20 different people's businesses in one industry and they all sound the same on the website. And it's about the people, the projects, and the connections within it that you have to get out there. So I still think to a degree we struggle with that message a little bit today, and it's something that we're forever working on. But I feel like every client that comes in the door, every connection that we make with anyone, with anyone in terms of the professional guys, we just talk to them about everything. So we like the fact that we can problem solve any problem that people come in here with, whether it's from concept. I've got here's a piece of paper with something I've created. This is what we want to create. Let's go. To guys, I've got a town planning permit. I'm stuck. What can we do from here? So we really try to, anyone that comes in the door, we can have a conversation with them and see if it is the right project for us and for the client. And if not, at least guide them in the right way. So yeah, it is still difficult to get the true essence of all the tiers of the things that we achieve. But in a nutshell, we can provide architecture, we can provide construction, and we can provide both combined together.
There's a couple of like questions I want to ask about that specifically. The first is that when you're being kind of very open and broad, or you're taking on a range of different things, big, small, lots of different problems, you kind of run two risks sometimes, right? It's that you kind of dilute your brand, right? It's harder to maintain quality, or this is just something that architects are concerned with. The other thing is like, taking on smaller projects, it's really hard to actually make that sustainable financially a lot of the time. And there's always this pressure in the industry. I need bigger projects. I need to take on more responsibility so I can charge more fees.
Yeah. So I guess it means we make a lot of tough decisions on a weekly basis, because thankfully in the last, few years, the number of inquiries have outweighed, the projects that we've taken on. And it does help you sort of identify what projects reflect who you are and what works. And whilst we're happy to work with clients on quite small scale projects, I don't like using dollar value too much as a specific range, because commonly, for less than $500,000 as an example, it can be quite difficult to achieve a client's outcome sort of regardless of what it is, unless it's very small and very internal based. So as soon as structure and other elements become involved in town planning and access and terrible soil conditions, as a lot of areas do for these small projects, they become really difficult to justify. And often in talking to the client about them, they either realize that they're happy to go, take the steps forward with you, even though they're going to pay more, or it's the end of the road. And sort of that barometer has helped us determine where sort of the small end of the market is. Sometimes you just get clients in the door that are so lovely and just they don't have the experience or the visual capacity to conceptualize their project. They just need you to help them get over the line. And an example is, just a really small kitchen and living room renovation. But if they're lovely enough and they're willing to work with you and to an extent pay for your service, then we're happy to take on those projects.
How do you kind of think about making the fees work in those sorts of situations? Because I have clients that really deal with, there isn't a lot of science in the industry around how do you set fees. It's very much like I just sort of pulled a number out of whatever, or a range, or whatever it is. It's not really grounded in very much at all. So what goes into your process for kind of calculating how you might charge a smaller job, or even a big job, but maybe the differences between the two, I suppose?
Yeah. So look, I didn't touch on the bigger jobs before, but I think in a way I look at them in a very similar approach. And whilst we have, fee schedules and the exponential chart to work out where your fee sits, I still think there's a range of architects in our community that don't exactly say where it should be 10%, 6%, 8%, 4%. And I like the approach of actually making a fixed fee based on time, and actually being a lot firmer with optionality in your fee, whether it be furniture, whether it be, high level automation or security, or other aspects which are not so generally intertwined with the architectural design that we might provide our client, and work out how long it's going to take, and that really helps determine my fee. What stages are involved? Are we going to are we going to need a lot of time in between to evaluate? What does a feasibility stage look like up front? And is that going to help us sort of define the brief? So often I feel like you have to set the brief, set the tone of the project first to be able to establish where your fee sits. But as I said, I don't often subscribe to a percentage fee on the project, because I feel someone loses out, whether the client loses out or whether the architect loses out. However, one of the ways in which, we've felt over time we can mitigate this when the budget changes. And that's a perfect example in every single project we've ever worked on. Talk with the client up front about what they expect to spend. We have a discussion with them about where we feel the project might sit based on our experience, typology, site, etc., and usually finished work. And often during the process, if people approach us for a design and construct job, we will provide pricing a little bit later on in the piece. And that's usually what I call the jaw drop moment, where people go, oh, my building's actually going to cost this much. But they still have time to reevaluate some things that may be important to them, or that they might want to pare back a little bit before we proceed to final documentation. And if there's a real discrepancy between where we started and where we are at sort of for that preliminary pricing, we address that by, if the price is 10% more than, as an example, where we started, we have the ability to renegotiate fees to a point.
Okay.
I have never done that in the time that I've practiced, but we've worked on how we facilitate that within our fee structure, because I think it just gives the architect a blanket of security in case you do end up with a project which is twice what you bargained for at the beginning.
And you found that system has generally, through practice, has worked out quite well. And communicating it works. You're able to communicate that easily to clients as well. And they seem to be pretty okay taking on that sort of arrangement at the beginning.
Generally they do, but I think whenever you mention anything to do with dollars, everyone always takes one step back out of the huddle in the conversation. I think it's a very natural, and I think whether it be, in our industry or others, I think not everyone just likes to have the conversation about money. And it's the second question I usually ask in a project, but it's not to sort of assess whether a project is suitable for us from a budgetary perspective. It's so that, we're not all spending hours and hours of meetings corralling, discussing, identifying, what's good about these projects with these great clients, or only then to find out that their budget is a fraction of what it's actually going to cost to build.
So is that one of the main sort of initial filters that you think about when you're meeting with a new client, is as far as their budget goes, is it like the realisticness of their brief is kind of is a major concern? Is that sort of one of the chief things that you kind of check for when you're discussing it with any new client?
Correct. There are many different ways in which to approach it, but generally speaking, the brief and how much larger, or how many bedrooms, bathrooms, basement, etc., the basic brief concept and their expectation, probably more than the budget of what they hope to spend.
Yep.
You need to identify and align those two things really quickly in order to then direct the project in the right way. Because you can still have a really successful project. It just might be 2/3 of the size of what the client actually expected it to be from before they contacted you.
So you're developing basically a fixed fee, and you're thinking about your time taken. I feel like I know a lot of architects that would really struggle to kind of concoct that idea of how long will this take me? And there can be such a big range in there, right? But are you pretty, I'll use the word meticulous, because it appears throughout your bio and everything, but pretty meticulous about calculating, like, we really do think, this will take this time. So you've got a really good kind of knowledge base around what it takes your office to produce work, right? How have you established that over time?
So, obviously things that you cannot always control your team, but as you grow and build up, a network of your staff and who's capable in what areas, some people have stronger at design, some are stronger at, town planning, documentation, and some are really good at understanding the site effects of, when things get built, how things need to be changed. So building up that team over the last 8 years has been, one source of that, a bit of a bookend, if you like. The other factor is really identifying the deliverables of what we want to provide for our clients. And I think that took me quite a while, many years to establish. And, over the last 2 to 3 years, I've truly honed on making sure that whilst I don't want to call it a template, but whilst, our clients, generally speaking, will get a very similar package for all the projects. And what we deliver at each phase is quite similar. There'll always be different types of drawings and different types of sections, details, 3Ds to show what they're going to get, but we stick to a pretty standard template, because at the end of the day, it comes back to it's still a business, and you can't overrun phases just however you feel to get the best effect. We have a level of confidence that we can deliver the client a great product, and if we know that there's a much higher budget, or we know that there's a high level of complexity in the project, we just account for that. And I think, architects, problem solvers, they are highly creative people. They can also be highly technical and skilled people. And I think there's a growth now in, the business side and operating it. And I think when you take all those things together, and we can guide clients through a process, we can talk about a plan, how it's going to look on site. We have that visual, we can visualize it very clearly. We need to convey that to clients in a much more bite-sized arrangement. And I feel that when we work through our presentations and our design process in the office, we do it in bite-sized pieces. And I think it helps everyone in the project team really capture what's important at each level, and then proceed. If there's an opportunity that we see that needs a higher level of creativity in terms of creating something a little bit more special, or needs to respond to the site or the brief in a certain way, we'll make sure that we account for that. But in terms of what we provide and what we give to the clients, it might be quite similar.
That's interesting. That's like something I never really hear in the industry. It's like when we identify that there's almost a need for that extra creativity, right? Is it the recognition that some situations, some projects demand a certain amount from your team, and some are much higher, but not every project is about absolutely pushing it as far as you can to the max, right? Do you think that sometimes, or I guess quite often for your clients, like in this battle between kind of creativity and certainty, do a lot of your clients go, give me the certainty, please?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of our clients actually, because they know we have the construction knowledge, they really want us to be a bit more upfront and guide them. And one of the common things is, when you feel like I'm going overboard, tap me on the shoulder and let me know, and we make a pact of doing that. And we know that's not what a lot of other architects do, but it's not our money at the end of the day. It's the client's money.
So the client, when they think they're going overboard, like they may be getting a bit too excited, wanting to put too many things in the project. Is that what you're kind of referring to, or you guys going overboard?
Well, it's a bit of both, but we often find, because we've already had the budget conversation early on in the piece, our clients are sort of already geared to, let us know, or for us to let them know when they feel that they're going overboard.
You're able to offer unconflicted or unbiased advice to the client in that situation, because you're not being paid a percentage. You're not making more money if they want to add more, do more. You're able to sort of stop them and say, hey, look, we're getting maybe a little bit carried away. And that's ultimately not against your best interests, right? I mean, or whatever. If you were on the percentage, you would be kind of conflicted there, right?
Yeah. It's true. And I've been told many a time that, the process you do conflicts the design process, and you should let it run more and see where you go. But we've been in our early stages of a business. We know what happens when you get to tender and you've got to redocument the project. It's it's the unspoken phase that no one speaks about. So we would much rather have those conversations earlier on and actually create a really good outcome that's not going to cost the client, architectural fee, engineering fees, thermal assessment fees, and all the other things involved, just for the sake of maintaining creativity. And I think that just comes into trusting what we do, and we know that we can create a really good outcome.
Yeah.
There are also different parts of a project. Many suburban blocks in Melbourne, we're all governed by the same rules. And I'm a firm believer in not overspending on areas where no one is going to appreciate or understand the building. The sides of houses down long, narrow blocks. We try not to push the budget there. But then internally, kitchens and living spaces might be the most single important thing to these people. And that's where we redirect some of that, I don't call it creativity, just a bit more oomph, because that's important to them. That's where they want to live. They have a passion for wine. They want to display their alcohol cabinet or particular artwork. We will guide the project to those areas.
And I imagine, I think a theme of this, maybe it'll even be the title of the episode, but something to do with repetition, because I feel like repetition and practice is like a big theme throughout the way you operate and your marketing. But this idea that if we try to develop almost a consistent framework for the deliverables, right? Do you find that through practice and through continuing development and getting more opportunities at bat, doing the same things over and over again, or in similar ways, that your team actually ends up becoming like essentially a lot more productive, and potentially they get a lot more design out of their time than they otherwise would if every new time they were doing something, it was like the first time they were doing it, or the approach was taken so differently each time that you're just kind of figuring it out. But have you sort of seen like the benefits of this kind of trying to develop a system and continuing to sort of repeat that with your team?
Definitely. And I think it's parts of the process, not the whole thing. So I think having a base framework and understanding the types of drawings and sort of the types of timeframes involved job to job, having that as a founding has really given, we feel, our team a sense of calmness in approaching multiple jobs. So, if you get a project that's at concept design and you receive or jump on a project at design development phase, what's required of you. And I think, what we want to produce for the clients just helps everyone have a base foundation. And it's probably been the one thing in sort of all our general reviews with staff of the year, exit interviews, people always ask about it. Have you got a framework? Have you got some checklists? Have you got bits and pieces that are going to assist us, to guide us, to help us, keep on track? And indirectly, we've sort of landed at that point here at S&K.
Yeah, so you're a big systems and processes guy. Hey, does that funnel down to, you mean you've got staff asking about checklists? My God. So like really down to that level, you're quite helpful in terms of generating sort of things to make their lives easier, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Does that take the form of sort of documents or operating procedures, or what kind of stuff do you like to use to help sort of instill this process-driven culture?
Well, I'll take one side step first before I get to the what. But I think having construction as an important arm in the business, and there's a lot of red tape, regulation, compliance, a lot of issues involved around it. It's probably bounded the sort of certainty that we need to create in the office around how systems work. And it isn't just inter-team and two clients, it's really between the construction and the architecture teams. And it comes down to that, the architect's instruction, the RFI, is there a simpler way to do it? Because we don't really do A-bit contracts. You can't do a contract within your own business between the architect and the builder. So we usually run different contracts with our clients, but we still operate between a contract admin and a construction team manner. So to have all those processes and steps is super important. And, everyone's got their standard folder template in their drive. That's something which we rely on, but I would say that from an architectural perspective, because I think that's the relevant part to this. It's, we have a few golden architectural sets that are projects which they're not the world's best projects, but in terms of a documentation package and a rigor around, regulatory compliance, bits of information that might be a little bit more difficult to ascertain, ground levels, terrain, etc. They're all there, and they're sort of things that we still reference back to 6-year-old jobs today to sort of say, hey, that was a really good way to achieve this outcome, or this approach to a period home or to a dual occupancy. Let's use that, and let's use that as an educational tool to teach, the new person.
Yeah, right. Matt, is the learning curve to becoming an architect at S&K quite steep?
Well, I think you mentioned reps before, and the first thing we do is throw people in the deep end, but it's really not. it's really not in a way to make them fail, because I'm not going to put anyone in a position where they can't achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
But they have to feel their way and find what works for them, and it's a little bit about what makes them tick and just seeing what they can absorb, which helps us redirect, what they're good at and how they can support the business. But I feel everyone that comes here, I believe, as a director of a business and as an architect, we work for our staff, and we need to give them everything that they need to make their jobs as easy as possible and support them, but without micromanaging and without bringing in, young grads and just having them draft and do markups for 4 or 5 years. Whilst I do think there is a bit of a gap in when you finish your studies and when you want to get a job, unless you've been working prior, you need to put them in the deep end, because everyone is different, and some people are really good at taking on the complexities of what we do, and you just need to nurture and grow with them.
Do you think that this idea of becoming the sort of the architect and the builder and the partnership there, is that something that you see becoming more common in the industry in the future? Or do you feel like there's some big benefits there for small architecture practices to maybe consider exploring that?
I think there'll always be players in the field. It's very difficult just to say, oh, I'm going to add that to my suite of services.
Yeah.
You know, with Rodney and I, it was something where, you know, the two people at the right time that wanted to establish a fully integrated business, and we sort of had to work out the mold in which it worked. And it took 5-6 years to go, okay, that works now. We know how to approach the situation. Can it be done 100%? You know, do people still ask us today, oh, can you exactly tell me how much my building is going to cost before it starts? You know, the answer is no. But we can say now, today, we can say we've completed these jobs in the past and they're very similar to yours, and this is how much, you know, within reason that they cost. So we can have a conversation around that, and then it gives them a bit of a baseline. So I think it helps. But in terms of making a jump, I think it's a question probably wider for the architecture society, where it may not be construction, but you might be able to branch out with other consultants. So having a town planning partnership the way SJB do as part of their practice, or splitting your interior and your architecture, you know, those sorts of services are very complementary. And I feel if there are architects out there that have an appreciation for business and want to add another dimension to what they do, looking for those associated services is only a way to refer work, build your network, and potentially provide a value add within a service that you already offer. Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of architects out there, and everyone's sort of fighting for the attention of others. But how you provide for your clients is another approach to gaining, you know, not market share, but, you know, more work.
Yeah.
And I think that's something a lot of people could consider if they have the right network of friends and colleagues around them.
Yeah. It makes it a lot easier to differentiate your practice, right?
Agreed. And yeah.
I mean, clients must love that they can work with you guys and then they've got the builder in the same, you know.
Yeah. Some do, and I think the reason why we feel quite, you know, vindicated in that decision is, you know, whilst we do tender on a lot of other projects as a construction firm, most of our work now, more than half, is definitely negotiated, because people see that if they like who you are and they like the work that you do, the only discussion points at the end of the day are, you know, what is your margin and how long is the project going to take? And if you can have an open conversation around finances and money, which we will always do with our clients, we feel that, you know, the plumber's a plumber, and it's got to be a plumber that we can work with, you know, from a construction perspective.
That's interesting. So you've worked with some really great architects, interior designers. I'm just going to quickly refer to my list that I've got here of stuff I've pulled off your website. But, you know, some really, oh God, I can't find my list. Okay, but from memory, Esteta, Golden, Tate, Flack Studio, just some for listeners that are outside of Melbourne, but some really great, like well-loved, you know, Melbourne, Australian interior design practices and architecture practices. Where did that kind of begin for S&K, these sort of working with these really high caliber designers? What are the components of how you've been able to kind of get your practice embedded in this kind of high-end interior design world?
Yeah, great question. And I think it stemmed down to looking at an opportunity with interior architects who had started to get this mold of, I want to do a whole house, but they're actually going to an interior architect because they were the first person that they saw. They were the nice pictures. They had the social content. I actually feel that interior designers had a lot better marketing content on Instagram and Facebook than architects did. First of all, a lot of it is super, you know, it looks super sexy. The styling shots, all the interior, the kitchens, the bathrooms. And with architects, sometimes you weren't even involved in the interiors and it was just your building. So there was often a bigger lag in terms of to get to that point to market your project. I think interior architects are partially just better at it than a lot of architects.
I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
But what we felt is that those questions were coming forward to the interior architects, and we weren't necessarily, you know, wedded to having to always do the interiors. We were happy just to do the architecture. So a lot of the projects in early days with Studio Tate, with Golden, etc., and, you know, even working now with Christopher Elliott, we just provide an architectural service and a scope, and they actually become, as I was talking about the being an advocate, they actually become advocates because they can rely on you and they can come and talk to us about architectural advice if they have a project which might need a few windows changed and it's in a heritage planning zone. Well, you know, we can assist them with that and assist their clients. And if they want to discuss buildability, costing, and they're moving on to construction, we can also provide that for them. So from our perspective, having both architecture and construction, the interior design market is just a massive pool of people and talented individuals and groups that that we feel could benefit from the assistance of similar companies like us.
Yeah, because I was always imagining it being more the kind of the building arm of S&K being the one that sort of interacts with the interior designers. But the way you've just explained it makes me think it's just as much the architecture arm, right? Which makes it even more relevant for this podcast, because I wonder if that's something that other architects could potentially explore. Like, maybe you've got it covered in Melbourne, but like maybe like London, maybe New York, maybe there's some architects there that could be thinking, hang on, I'm really not doing the interiors. Maybe it would be great to start exploring partnerships with interior designers that are absolutely killing it on Instagram.
I think it comes down to a confidence that I know I'm not always only going to be working on projects that are just architectural and supporting, and you have to trust the process and knowing that we do get projects in that we do the entire work top to bottom. But I think we just love working with great people, and I'm a really firm believer of people who are experts in their field. They're the people that you want to surround yourself with, and you have the ability to work on much better is the wrong word, but awesome, better looking, maybe sometimes bigger budget, more interesting projects if you surround yourself with a wider branch of people, because not everyone is going to find you and give you the golden job. It doesn't work like that. And a lot of jobs that we undertake, they're the ones that you need to pay the bills. They're the ones you need to just have content and grow your your business. That's what's really important. I do want to mention, I think one of the things, because this is a marketing podcast as well.
Please, yeah. But, so my guests forced me to talk about marketing, but yeah, go. If we must, Paul, go on.
I think the interior designers are the ones that sort of taught me that we need to brand ourselves a bit better and show ourselves and our processes in a greater light. And you mentioned reps earlier, but it is all about doing reps. Gary Vee, who I do like to listen to from time to time, does talk about you don't get fit talking about doing push-ups. So the only way to get better at what you do is to continuously practice and put out content without really the care of who clicks on it to like it. That's probably if you do that, then you're really going to struggle. You just need to keep putting content out there, and being active in what you put out there is important, because people will often leave comments and leave likes sometimes and approach. And I think responding to those people, whether it's on house, when people ask you a question about what color laminate did you use on that robe, or just giving you a compliment on your work, or giving you a negative comment, responding is super important in maintaining community and showing that that you care and that you're part of this thing that's larger than just your business.
Yeah, it's odd because, like, just on that engagement point, we'll come back to the interior designers and the reps and stuff and social media, but there are some architects who really do feel like the thing that they need to do to get to that next level is like stop responding to those questions on house and like stop responding to people on Instagram.
You never ever know where your next inquiry, which could be turned into a project, is going to come from. And sometimes the best projects we've ever worked on have come from a client that's approached us, via email, called and followed up. I found out that their budget wasn't right, or wasn't right for the type of project they wanted to do, and I was upfront, and they said, "Thank you very much. It's been really helpful, but this just isn't for us." To only find out that your next job and inquiry, which is a fantastic, large budget home, has come from that person telling their friends about the experience that they had with you. And you just never know when those things will happen, and you have to maintain that same level of professionalism to everyone.
That's really interesting. The thing that seems a little bit counterintuitive about your situation is that some architects are like, I will be nice to everybody and be professional and respond when I feel that I don't have enough work and I've got no leads, the phone's not ringing. But then as soon as that's busy, I don't need to do that stuff anymore. Whereas you're in the situation you mentioned earlier, we're in the fortunate point right now where there's more demand than there is supply. We're definitely having to choose and carefully manage which projects we take on. Yet you still enact these sort of positive, good practices. You don't just go, okay, time to turn the tap off. Like, no more marketing needed at this point. In
a young business, they're the things that I think you get drawn to, because you realize you don't want to take on more than, you don't bite off more than you can chew. But what we learned is it can actually be detrimental, because whether it's in construction, whether it's in design, if you stop doing those things in the times when you're busy and you're very difficult to pull them back when you start getting quiet, or when you have a quiet month or 2 month period when projects are finishing. So you really have to put your foot on the accelerator. And I actually think when you're the busiest is the time that you need to be pushing it harder. And pushing it harder doesn't mean anything more than just adding a bit more to what you do. And I think people think that you have to do everything yourself, whether it's in business, whether it's in marketing. We've got a videographer which we effectively have on a form of retainer, and we just have an agreement to provide some video content around our projects just to show process and craft. Because if we wait for all the finished projects to occur, we're going to be waiting 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to get to that. And we want to engage with people about, we're not just a finished product, but this is who we are in the middle, and this is how we do it. And here are some cool semi-artistic things that we can show you, whether it's in Instagram stories and the video content, and LinkedIn are sort of the mechanisms for that we feel the most engaging.
What was that point where you guys realized like branding is a really, really important component here?
Yeah, I think we realized when we were quiet. So I think it came out of the sort of the negative part of not doing, starting to just think about this stuff when we had a quiet few months on all fronts. It wasn't related to an economic event. It was just timing. And we ended up going, okay, let's start to push and build. But what we did is we did everything slowly. So we got our Instagram working well, and we just made sure our Facebook page worked. And even the simple things about just phone numbers and addresses and open hours, like making your page look professional, starting slowly. Instagram was one, and then building into stories. And we just get everyone in the office. We've got a bit of a photo pool to share, where you go, what you do, take pictures of site meetings, trade meetings, and just sort of build content around what's around, what you have in front of you. We're not creating anything new. It's just documenting. And that's really important. And, bit by bit, then we went into LinkedIn, and I found, from an organic perspective, just to connect with business professionals. And I guess from a B2B perspective, it can't always be B2C. B2B can actually is a lot easier than B2C, business to client. And I think I've grown to meet a lot of people, and a lot of interesting people who are highly skilled through the LinkedIn platform, just by communicating your ideas, your work, and sharing interesting pieces of information.
That was, I mean, disclosure, we kind of worked together during this process of you initially figuring out LinkedIn and a few other things. And you'll probably be happy to admit that you're a bit of a perfectionist, Paul, and pretty like attention to detail is kind of your forte, right? But you have a strong belief in this idea of like learning through doing it and experimentation. But that was definitely a challenge that you had to confront, right? In terms of, I'm going to go out there and do stuff that I haven't done before. I don't really know how to do, but you got over it. You got through it eventually, right?
I did. And I have to thank you for assisting me with that.
All you.
I did it, but I needed to be pushed off the edge just a little bit. What I've realized about myself, and I think, being self-aware is super important. I understood that I need to feel comfortable with something to do it, and then I'm happy to proceed with it. And it's often about playing around with the platform and understanding what happens when you do this. And then when you understand those ideas and the sort of the process into creating this content, and it isn't so scary, then you feel confident, and then you do more and more and more and more. So it all, as I said, it all comes back to just practice. And I think just being honest, and probably the biggest hurdle is people always care about what other people think, but I think you need to provide this content. If you're putting it out there, you believe in it, or you need to believe in it. It needs to be very truthful. It needs to come from the heart, if you like, or from a very guided place that you feel you can communicate with your peers. If you're just pushing someone else's agenda or saying something you don't really believe in, no one's going to believe you anyway. And I think coming back to those roots made it super easy just to share really cool things with people. Well, I think they're cool sometimes. And it's also been the things you think are really cool, no one else, likes or cares about. And the things that you think, oh, that's not really great, but we'll give it a go. They're the things that people love the most.
So reflecting a little bit on because like there's the visual stuff, the process stuff. I mean, that's pretty straightforward in terms of you guys just put out a lot of stuff and kind of go, some of it will catch, some of it won't. That's fine. Whatever. We're just kind of documenting, as you mentioned. But with the LinkedIn stuff where you're actually like having to do some writing, that's kind of taking it to a kind of the next level, really, and expressing your point of view and your opinions and beliefs, reflecting on those experiments that you've run doing that on LinkedIn. Is there anything that's kind of clicked for you in terms of types of content or certain types of messages that you feel resonate better than others in the sort of stuff that you've been sharing on LinkedIn and elsewhere?
At the beginning, I would have said it was all, very much about sort of the congratulatory, messages and the posts about new project and new work and new site. And there's definitely been a boom in that sort of approach.
So initially you thought that was your best content.
Yeah, exactly. That's because that was easy. It was there in front of you. You just had to grab it and, it was out. And that for us, I call that process in a way. So signing a new job is part of our business process and winning more work for the office, but putting a photo up, that's just capturing what's around us. It was super easy. COVID was a really easy step, I think, as a transition, because it sort of made you think a little bit more about how it affected your team. I think, you do a post on working from home, even though that wasn't a process related thing. It was, oh, great, we're now in this situation. I'm in this environment. And I didn't think people would really care, but just sharing your thoughts as someone, as a professional, let alone an architect in this environment, it captured people, talking, maybe a post about Rodney and I and spending a bit of time together on site discussing something, these sorts of things, they seem to now be the bits and pieces. And when you can write about them, that create a bit more of create more of the like, if the like button or the celebrate button. Now the process stuff, I think, just gets intertwined within. So I think to differentiate yourself on LinkedIn, you definitely need to share your ideas and your thought more than just, new project update, etc. I think that's the key in engagement.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the project update, you're like, it's right there for you. There's like an obvious action reaction, right? Or a trigger, see something, that's a milestone, something very identifiable has happened there. But in your day-to-day work, you're not necessarily taking the time, particularly because you're very busy. You're not sort of laying back in the beanbag chair in the meeting room having a thinking session about like, what's going on in the practice, that sort of thing. How do you kind of think about when you're going to post some of your thoughts? Like, what are some like triggers, or what sort of things when does that idea pop up in your mind? Are there any sort of, things you've noticed about how that happens for you?
Well, for someone that professes to be super organized, I believe planning your social media content, the stuff that I do on, say, LinkedIn as an example. Instagram is one thing, I think, because we have a strategy for that. But in terms of LinkedIn, not having a plan is the best plan. And I think you become your most honest when that happens. I think, you need to look for them. You need to be yourself. And I think when you are yourself, that's when you can just talk about things that are important to you. An example, without going into too many, was, there was an acoustic test that was done on one of our apartment projects. And for anyone that works on larger existing apartment buildings, especially in Melbourne, you need to, get a sample of your flooring tested and then get it acoustically rated and ticked off by the body corporate before you can install it. But no one knows what these machines look like. So just, going to a meeting and seeing that this thing is not what even I expected, and I've been a professional for 10 years as an architect, going, oh, that's amazing. Short video, makes a loud noise, and then you have some content to go, well, that's really interesting, and people are gonna like this. People are gonna have no idea what it is, and then they're gonna read about it. So I think I feel for that content, it is really just as you go, and it's all around you. And I think it's just how you can look at it, translate it, and then put it into words, video, image, etc.
So that would be an example of like a kind of more education or curiosity. There's many aspects to why that post would work, but are many of the posts that you're doing kind of, I guess, going, let me show you something cool, let me teach you about something? Is that sort of generally the thread that ties them together, or it's just really a mix, right? You're just kind of going for it, working with whatever you've got.
I think I like to look at it as a lens of what I'm doing and what's happening around me. And, sometimes there are weeks when it's more focused around other like similar topics, and other times, it might be more creating something new or a thought or sharing something that I heard and I've been thinking about for a few weeks, and now I'm ready to share that idea with people. And I've always got this backlog of things that I want to discuss. Sometimes they're like, potentially in my mind could be super inflammatory. Sometimes there are a lot of things that people in our profession, do that are super good, and I'd like to talk about them more, but they're not always the first thing you go to. And sometimes there are things that aren't great, and things you hear in the industry about how fees work, or you hear that another architect had this amazingly huge fee, and how does that work? And you question it, and you want to bring it back. So, I think everything is literally in the air around you, and it's at every project you visit, it's with every client that you meet. And that's really the source of inspiration for just sharing who I am as a professional and who we are as a business. I also think, not giving advice, but I think just making sure you tag other people that work with you on a project in any form is so important, and just acknowledging their presence in that job. And I don't think that's done enough.
Yeah, right. So just like everybody involved, give them a tag.
The project team, yeah.
Yeah. Also, really good idea on LinkedIn as far as getting more reach for your posts. So it's a really good way
it has a secondary effect.
Secondary effect. You get some engagement. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Really interested in like your kind of approach to developing mutually beneficial relationships with allied disciplines. I have some clients that want to start doing more of that, catching up for a coffee with somebody, or, really reaching out to a stranger in the industry. But they find that process of making that initial outreach to be awkward or difficult. Could you maybe give some sort of insight into your approach for kind of meeting new people in the industry and, making that first point of contact, especially?
So I always think it's good to know who you want to meet and why you want to meet them, and having sort of a good understanding, and whether that's within your own profession or, other professions, like, you just need to meet other consultants, or you just want to meet other architects. You need to establish who you want to meet and why you want to meet them first. So we find here, meeting with other architects, sort of a dual, or interior architects, sort of as a dual link within our business, because obviously we have the ability to provide them with an architectural service, and we have the ability to provide them with from a build perspective. But in terms of doing that, I think good advice is to find sort of that intermediary that can give you a warm referral or an introduction. And by doing that, at least you have there's a little foot in the door to be able to have a conversation. And if they're interested in meeting with you, then it happens. It's easy. Yep. It's a no-brainer. I think that's really important. Cold calling is really difficult, but I think you need to be able to find a way to connect with that person, but using a warm referral that you both know is the way in. And sometimes the best sources of these people are actually the trade and supplier reps that we work with, because if you're working with a lighting company, which we work with a few, but as an example from Est Lighting, I have a contact there, and they know a lot of architects, and if I ever really would like to meet someone or get put in touch with, James is someone who I'll go and have a conversation with, and usually when you do a lot of work with people, they're willing to sort of make an introduction. So I think, as I said, it all comes back to these people are all around you. You use these people on an everyday basis for everything that you do. That's the network that you need to jump in.
And how often are you doing that sort of thing? Like even today, I mean, it's probably, I guess I was going to say maybe it's less crucial than it once was, but I'm saying that probably not, right? It's probably as crucial as ever, right? To continue to meet people. You never really feel like you have gone, okay, I know enough people now. I'm good. Yeah. I can rest on my laurels. I've met everybody I need to meet. How regularly in your kind of typical month or, typical quarter are you kind of going out and meeting somebody new?
Being realistic, I'd like to say at least once a fortnight, but I'm constantly trying to find the right people. And it is about finding the right people. So it's not just about anyone, but people don't like to be sold. So obviously when you meet, you want to meet them for the right reasons. We want to meet with other architects and other builders and other interior designers to understand what they do, look at their work, see if it's something that we could be aligned on, and just have a really good conversation. Often you find that half the conversation is about the industry and telling old war stories and things that are quite fun. And by breaking down those barriers, that you could easily get considered for future projects. And it's no different when you're looking for clients in an architectural perspective, when you meet them out and about.
And in terms of like when you articulate to somebody that reason for wanting to meet with them, do you address that elephant in the room of going that, there might be some benefit of us, like, we could possibly be a good fit for each other? Or do you kind of beat around the bush and kind of go, I just want to learn more about your business, or give me the tactics, Paul, so that I can write my own template and start, selling it to architects or something.
Easy, done.
Yeah, done.
So I definitely think you need to feel engaged with them first. So you need to like what they do before you get them in the room. But then when you do, yes, you need to just have a good conversation, learn about their business structure, what sort of work they do, who they work with, what other builders they work with, do you work with interior designers, and find sort of commonalities between you in a general conversation form. And after that, if you feel there are synergies that could work, then you can always, talk about, oh, we did a similar project, or you can refer back to yourself first. And if you still feel the conversation is going, then you can always, express that, look, hey, it could be really wonderful to work together on a project one day. Rodney and I know here at S&K that those conversations can take 6 months to 2 years to fester.
Yeah.
And the reason why people want the immediate outcome is we're thinking about these things long term. We're thinking about people we want to work with long term. I think patience is something you really have to have with networking, and not get bummed out that if you have a meeting and then next week you haven't got an email saying,
we'd like
got
to
a new
consider
project,
you
or
for
there's
a
a tender
project.
for you. Yeah. Like it doesn't work like that. And people aren't looking for you when they're ready to go. You need to just be in their minds. And I think that all stems back to that branding, So if you meet someone in the same forum that I've just discussed, and then you're actively pursuing social media and marketing strategies, and they see you on those strategies, in 2 years when they're ready to do something, you're the name that's going to be in their head.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I think that patience is incredibly important. So in the initial outreach, you're saying, hey, I really like your work. I would love to catch up with you and discuss, to have a chat about what you guys are doing. Is it as simple as that, or?
Yeah, could be that. I mean, for us, it's easy. We always have things that we're building or designing, but it could be, hey, I'd love to show you around one of our sites to show you what we can do.
Yeah.
I guess it also comes back to why that warm referral is super critical, because if they already know that there's someone in between that likes you and appreciates you, that meeting and the process forward is a lot easier.
Yeah, there we go. I got my copy for the template, so I'm happy to move on now. Let's talk about Terren, because Terren is like the big project. Do you want to just briefly do your elevator pitch and kind of explain how do you sort of summarize what Terren is?
Yeah, so look, Terren was a brainchild of Rodney and I, like about 4 years ago, quite a long time ago. We always had clients that came to us who, wanted a project for a specific cost, and realistically, we sort of found it to be that sort of 700 to $1 million, or a bit over $1 million in range. They wanted it finished yesterday, so oh, next week let's start. Without any understanding of the sort of site that they have and where they're located and how it's affected. And they also wanted to know exactly what it would cost before they started. All things that any architect will tell you, I have no idea how to do that, or it's really difficult to do that, because we need to go through a brief, we need to go through process, and so on and so forth. So we effectively created Terren, which creates accessible architecture to help people have a quick solution, but beautifully crafted. And effectively, we have a range of homes on our website. It is a separate business, and it suits a different range of families and people, bedrooms quantities and bathroom quantities and so on. And they all, the buildings effectively look like cousins of one another. They're all from the same family, but they're all designed to suit in different blocks. And we incorporate engineering and thermal assessment as part of the package, and effectively within a month, if you don't require town planning for your site, which a lot of these are suited for, clients are able to walk away with a package of homes ready, which they can control for tender. Take it to any builder that they choose and build it on their land.
Yeah, so that's the point. That's what they do afterwards is like entirely up to them, right? So they've got the documentation, everything, and and you guys provide that kind of certainty around the pricing, and then if they do decide to work with you and get it built with you guys, then you sort of commit to that pricing, right? So you stand by that, and that's
correct.
Yeah.
So what we did is we have S&K Group, our building arm, put a price on these, because if clients understand how much it could cost for them to build, then there's a level of confidence for them that if they like the design, they know what it costs, they know how long it's going to take. It's a much easier, position for them to take and to work out if this is what they would like to do. And, S&K Group can build them, but it's not actually the aim of Terren. Terren's really just to provide another layer of architecture to people that we often find are caught between volume builders, of all levels. It doesn't matter what it is, but somewhere where you're tied with the architect or the designer and the construction is all in one, versus a really custom bespoke architectural product where often you won't exactly know what it's going to cost until the end, and the timing is also a lot longer. So it really fits a mold of people in the middle.
It's a very big group of people in the middle too, isn't it?
It seems to be a tight budget with a large amount of people in that pocket.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There have been sort of projects in the past where architects have tried to design the plans and then try to advertise those plans that offer them maybe limited edition or more widely available. But, you know, you kind of, I remember mentioning to me in the past that the price is a massive barrier, right?
Correct.
That's something that makes it very hard for most architects to just kind of go, here's a house that, you know, I did for a client. It got 3/4 of the way through. Then that client, you know, disappeared, but I'm now selling the plans. It doesn't really work that way, does it?
I think it would be very tough to sell that. And I think just knowing that a particular set of drawings with a particular specification, knowing how big it is and what you get, knowing what it could be built for, that's the end game. That is what will get people over the line or not. But we also know it's not for everyone. And you know, building your home is like one of the most expensive things you'll ever do, you know, by the time you factor in the land. So, you know, this is really aimed at looking for people that are caught in the middle, that know what they would like, they know how big they would like it, and they have an appreciation and an understanding of an architectural style that they want to achieve.
Yeah. And so in the marketing around this, you establish it as a separate business. It's got its own branding. From the very start, you guys went pretty heavy on like the branding, copywriting, renders, the visualization. Like, how important was that to the process of kind of launching Terren?
Super important, because we had nothing to show. You know, we're not going to build display homes. You know, we can use ones that are completed to show people, you know, in the future. And hopefully, you know, we have a project in McKinnon, so hopefully that could be used as a project. But, you know, using the visual cues of showing bathrooms, kitchens, the spaces people want to live in, you know, living areas, facades, how it would look in a street, and really investing in the renders was the biggest single marketing expense that we could do. And that really got people seeing what it is that we can achieve and what we could create. That coupled in with, you know, LinkedIn and Instagram, and we ventured into advertising, something we don't do for S&K Group, but we actually did it through, you know, Facebook and Instagram to help push and gain some reach. You know, it seemed to work and sort of grow a bit of a following, but you know, officially we're only 4 months in as a business, you know, just to promote this product. So patience is the key again. It's growth, it's sharing, it's educating, it's, you know, and we're in it for the long haul, and we know it's going to take a few years. And I think that's what we reminded ourselves is overnight successes, they're rare, very rare. And, you know, to create a good long-standing business, you know, just it takes patience and dedication.
Yeah. And so again, I mean, you mentioned to me in an earlier phone call that you've found that sort of more of the guerrilla marketing and the direct outreach and the generating that networking approach to things has also been a key aspect with Terren as well. So is that something that you're finding is actually really a great channel for promoting this project a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think it stems from looking at your product and seeing who else could benefit from it. And whilst we know the end user is the person that's going to live in it, and they're the ones that are going to, you know, love it. At the end of the day, it's sort of similar to networking. Who's that in between person that will get us to more clients? So because we're not building it, there's no association with, you know, builders that we can't talk to. One idea. So we've got a whole CRM of builders that we are going to speak to and approach and give them a builder's pack, and they can have a look and understand what the cost of these things are, because our intel is that plenty of people go directly to their builders and say, I really want to build a house with you. What do I do? And if enough builders understand and know about it, and know about the product, it's something that's very readily turned over in a very short space of time. Your engineering's included, the energy rating's there. Bring your own surveyor and your land survey, and we can get going, because they know how much it's going to cost. And on the other side, real estate agents and buyers advocates are other people that we're speaking to, just to help them, you know, potentially provide another avenue to clients selling their land. I mean, how many times have you driven past a real estate agent board and just seen the furry grass with the map on it? You know, you could have a nice render and say this could be on your block. So in a very simplistic way. So, you know, whilst we have no other time in our daily lives, we've been investing time to go to meetings, you know, with real estate agents and meet with builders to sort of talk to them about it, and start slow and grow a bit of a following, if you like.
That's so interesting. I guess like architects could possibly borrow some of these ideas from as well. Like maybe initially when you're in that awkward stage in the first few years where you don't have any built projects in your portfolio, then maybe the investment in renders is really, really worthwhile. Like, because maybe even critical. like that pack, that builder pack. I mean, what a phenomenal idea. Like there's so many good things that you guys are trying there. Of the different stuff that you're doing with Terren, if you were kind of starting an architecture practice from scratch today, or maybe even stuff from S&K as well, what do you really think is kind of a really strong avenue amongst all of those things if somebody was just going to start small?
Start small. So I did hear this recently from someone else, and I 100% agree with it, is I think when we first started out, we invested a lot of time and money on our website.
Yeah.
And, in the first few years of a business, the first 3 years of your growth phase, really, that's when you start to get identified based on, the types of working clients that come in the door. I would say not spending that heavy money on your website first is the right key, having something a lot simpler, and then investing everything you can into as many forms of social media that you can is a way that people are going to see you more. For a website, people have got to find you. If you're out there on social media, the nature of paid and organic is going to be a lot more beneficial to getting your name out there and sharing what you do. I mean, I'm not a camera person per se, so TikTok's not my thing. And there are a couple of TikTok architects out there, but if you, my advice would be that if you're a video person or you like to be in front of the camera, find avenues that promote you and let you do that. If you're written, try written. If you're verbal, try a podcast. Find ways to put yourself out there and start with that. And then as your identity develops and the type of work and direction that you want to follow, then you can hone in on your website and actually give yourself a stronger base.
Yeah, that's so true. Like overdoing it on the website when you've only got 15 visitors and 13 of them are you, your phone, your laptop, and your mum, is not like necessarily like the most sensible place to put all your eggs right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's really, really interesting. I guess that one kind of final thing to touch on is, time management, man. How do you do it? You've got like a lot on your plate. How do you plan it all out?
Well, I think it's important to note that you have to love it. You have to love what you do. And I think there's a business/entrepreneurial side of what I do that keeps me driven. And whilst I do work after hours and on weekends, it's quite normal. I think what I've learned to adjust is the amount of time I spend on the business and in the business, and surrounding yourself with the right staff and the right people to deliver the right jobs is what will let you do that, which then provides you more time to grow the business, grow yourself. And that's super critical. For me, it's a very simple philosophy. There's only finite time in the day. You need to spend the time on the things you love and that you want to do. As an architect, whether you're sort of the lower level grad, you're, been in a firm for 10 years and you're a senior architect, making sure you're spending the right time at the right meetings with the right people and asking the right questions, focusing on what you love and trying to push to do what you love, that's the key and will keep you sustained. It's not just for people that are business owners, but for me personally, I just try to spend the time doing what I love and making sure I'm servicing my clients.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. What the thing that was flashing, like the red flag in my mind, was that I can picture the amount of architects I speak to who would say, but what I love doing is just concentrating on like the design. That's what I love. I don't love any of the other aspects of business, right? Which is a real problem.
Yeah, it is. But I would say to that, then surround yourself and maybe bring someone else on board that is really good at doing the other things.
Yeah.
It might mean that you need to share your business with someone else, but you could be the world's best designer, but if you're the world's most terrible businessman, it doesn't matter how good you are.
Like so many architects listening to this, wouldn't you be better off having a Paul Kegen by your side? Like, wouldn't that make your life a hell of a lot easier? Like, at the end of the day, that's something that isn't done. Of a lot of firms start, maybe, me and best mate want to start a firm together, yep. Or a person and their partner want to start, but that sort of later on stage of a few years in going, hey, maybe I don't actually love some aspects of some of my business responsibilities. I don't love marketing. I don't love doing this. I don't love doing that. I don't like meetings. I don't like dealing with new clients. I just want to kind of do my thing. I want that independence and that creativity and that whatever. That's why I started a firm and I want to work for myself. But those things, maybe being open to the idea of partnering with somebody else can be a really powerful thing.
I think it can. I do think it's the longer term game. You've really got to be comfortable with the future decisions you make. But
Of
a way
course.
to get around the short term of that is finding mentors. So if you know someone that is really good at business or has
Yeah.
run a successful business, talk to them about some of your difficulties. Could be marketing, could be business. You just might need a bookkeeper. There are plenty of really good bookkeepers that
Yeah.
never have to set foot in your office, that can do it all remotely, and it works brilliantly.
Yeah.
So it's all about surrounding yourself with the right team of people internally, but also
Yeah.
the right people around you as that periphery offering.
Yeah. Do you think that you can develop? Have you found that you can develop a passion for a part of it for parts of business that you don't love initially?
I think if your mind wants to take you there and to something that you're going to grow and love, fine, it will. But I think if you don't want to do it, it's one thing. But I think you need to understand how to do it or understand how it works. So whilst you may not be the person that you may not like marketing, and you might not want to do your Instagram posts on a daily basis and do your stories, but if you understand how it works, how many you should be doing, how hard it is to actually put one up there, how hard it is to gain content, and you've actually had a little go with it for say a week or a fixed period of time, and then you give it to someone else, at least you know the process. It's your business and there's a level of control you need to take. You just don't
Yeah.
have to do it on a full-time basis. And I personally can't. I do bits of it, but I have a team,
Yeah.
different people in my team that help me with it.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. There's nothing that makes me more nervous than when I'm talking to an architect and they're sort of saying, "Oh, I hate social media." They haven't done any right, but they're like, "I hate it. I really don't want to do it. Is there somebody that I can just hire that will just like do it for me?" Or, "I don't want to write a blog. Can somebody just like write my blog for me?" And it's that process of like, you should probably, even if you force yourself to do it long enough that you can learn to understand it before looking to get somebody else.
You need to know how it works. You need to know how hard it is to start with, because it is
That's
that new
interesting.
new skill.
Yeah.
And then if you really don't want to do it, and sometimes you surprise yourself and you're like, oh, I actually can do this once a week,
Maybe initially I thought I don't like this, but I started doing it, and then certain aspects of it were enjoyable, and then all of a sudden you start to be like, oh, maybe I will keep doing that.
It is, and you've got to make sure you're trying the things that are real to you. As I said before, like if you're not a camera person, stick with the format that means you can do it. But it's the same as business and accounting. It's like you don't have to do the books, but you need to understand how to read a profit and loss sheet, and you need to know how a balance sheet works. If you understand how they work, when there are issues, at least you have a base level of understanding when you're accountant or your bookkeepers scratching their head, looking at you funny about what are we going to do, or how do we tackle this situation? As long
Yeah.
as you have an understanding, that's okay.
Awesome. Paul, I think we're coming up on our time. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and hopefully it's something we can do again in the future. Thank you so
Thanks
much,
very
man.
much. No, thanks. It was really wonderful, and I hope it was informative.